Welcome everyone, Costin here with a discussion about some of the strongest early game armies that are available in Total War Warhammer 3 in the campaign. The strongest early game Doomstacks. Now, a couple of things to mention here: that races that may struggle recruiting good units are not going to make the cut. This does include the Warriors of Chaos, who overall are in a really good spot, but yeah, they're going to struggle a bit because of their recruitment slots. The way the recruitment work, they're going to struggle to be able to reliably get very high-powered armies. Besides, the Warriors of Chaos are more about the variety of their units rather than having, one or two units that are really, really good in their armies. Actually, the Warriors of Chaos have exceptional campaign mechanics. It's not their armies that elevates them. It's really the mechanics of the faction, like the Gifts of Chaos, for instance, the ability to get things like Hell Cannon. But yeah, it's a bit touch and go when it comes to that. Also, another thing, I'm not going to include Doomstacks that are very specific to a legendary lord. So the Zombies of Ghorst, for instance, are not going to be included because zombies for other legendary lords are just not that great, even though vampire counts are one of the strongest races in the game. So with that being said, let's take a look at the list. At number 5, we have the High Elves, who have the ability to recruit Spearmen, Archers without light armor from any settlement, and then can also get Eagle Claw Bolt Throwers at tier 3. So this is really a tier 1 army with some tier 3, with 2 tier 3 units, and it is exceptionally good. Now, you may need a barracks to get the archers with light armor, though from any settlement building you can get regular archers. The only difference is the armor between the two of them. That is pretty much it. So they're more vulnerable, and worth saying, by the way, when it comes to light armor, it does seem like the auto resolve does care about the armor of units when it determines how good or bad you're going to do if you try not to resolve a battle. But what's the strength of this kind of Doomstack? It is widely available for every single High Elven legendary lord. It's very easy to recruit, and yeah, sure, you may not get light armor unless you have a barracks, but you can get the regular archers just fine, and they'll do pretty much the same thing. But what's so good about this? Well, Spearmen are great line holders, and they'll be able to withstand in the early game far better than vast majority of units. Though, of course, they won't do a lot of damage unless we're talking about large units or cavalry units, really, when we're thinking about them. Archers, however, on the other hand, are something very different. Archers are very strong when it comes to early game fights because they have really good range, pretty good missile strength. They are not so good against armor. They do have an issue when it comes to dealing with the armor of their enemies. But to be quite honest, a lot of the early game range units do have that same issue. But early game, you're not really going to encounter that many heavily armored units. And even when you do, it's not really going to be too much of a problem. Like, you can take a stack like this and decimate the dwarves, for instance, in a straight up fight. It's only some exceptions where you might struggle with an army like this, but an army like this isn't just a really good early game army, it's a really good army throughout the entire game. Maybe adding some heroes, but really it is an army that's going to do well in battles. Open field battles, siege battles, because you've got so much range and so much range firepower that you're going to be able to decimate the enemy in minor settlement and siege battles. And the Eagle Claw Bolt Throwers, their main purpose is really to snipe down walls, and to snipe down tower walls in particular, take those out, eliminate them, and then you use the archers to kill the enemy units behind the walls, and also use the archers to take down enemy towers. It is a really good army. Elves are in a really good spot when it comes to it. Like, their early game potential is pretty incredible when it comes to it. They don't have the best early game economy, they don't have the best growth control, all that early game. Because they're more of a race that grows to be exceptionally powerful, not one that starts exceptionally powerful. But even so, they do have one of the best early game armies that is available in the game at the moment. Even though ranged has been nerfed in Warhammer 3, and because of all the minor settlement battles and siege battles, a melee army may end up doing better. But even so, the ranged Doomstack of the Elves is still fairly strong, though you may want to add some Spearmen this time around as opposed to just relying on pure Archers. It used to be in Warhammer 2 that going pure archers was the smarter move, but nowadays it's like, yeah, you want to add some melee units, just, you know, having some variety, having some line holders can really help you out. Now, number 4 is the Dwarves. The Dwarves have a lot of issues as a race at the moment, but they do have one of the best early game armies available to them as well. Specifically, the Quarrellers Doomstack. So Dwarves do have pretty good infantry units that they can recruit from tier 1. Miners with blasting charges that can do a lot of AoE damage, Dwarf Warriors who can resist a lot of damage, Dwarf Warriors with grey weapons, but at tier 2, you can start recruiting Quarrellers. Now, the game is a bit misleading when it says that they're decent melee combatants, because they're more than just decent. So if I look at Fork's army way over here, you can see what I'm going to talk about. So, this is an Axe Warrior, this is a Quarreller. A Quarreller will have slightly less armor, leadership, melee defense, quite a bit more, less melee defense, melee attack, and charge bonus. But the thing is, this is a pure melee unit, this is a ranged unit. This ranged unit can do incredible damage from range. It's not quite the same range as an Elven Archer, though it's pretty close. Crucially, however, quite crucially, these Quarrellers do quite a lot more armor-piercing damage, because they are crossbows, so they of course do have armor-piercing damage. It does require a barracks, and that is a downside, but you can acquire them at tier 2. But it goes further than just pure Quarrellers. It's also the Grudge Throwers. So one of the best Doomstacks you can get with all of your Dwarven armies would be a mass of Quarrellers, maybe some heroes if you can get them, and then Grudge Throwers. Grudge Throwers are pretty great, though they're more designed to take down walls, take down towers, which gives you a great deal of combat potential in a siege, since the vast majority of battles are either walled settlements or minor settlement battles. Having Grudge Throwers will actually help you a great deal with that. This kind of army can sit outside of a settlement, like you start a minor settlement battle, you park it outside the settlement, you start sniping the enemy, and even when they do run out of ammunition, it's no problem whatsoever, because you can then just send these guys in melee and they'll do a pretty decent job after you've softened up the enemy. In a pure-on fight, they're going to be really, really hard to overcome because of their very high armor. Now, another thing, as I've mentioned, the auto resolve, as people have pointed out to me, does seem to heavily favor armored units. Quarrellers are heavily armored units, which gives them a significant advantage in a fight. Quite a significant advantage. Now, Quarrellers with great weapons, they're going to do even better in melee, though they are going to sacrifice some melee defense for that higher melee attack and higher damage that they do get. But they are generally better, though they are also a bit more expensive. And money is an issue when you are playing the Dwarves, sadly enough. But yeah, the Dwarves do have an incredibly good army. It's one of the few silver linings that they do have. Now, this army is expensive, and it ties into the issues that the Dwarves do have currently in the game, but it's certainly a powerhouse of an army that could be able to stand up against most, if not all, of the early game challenges. With some exceptions, a few exceptions, but there's very few armies that would be able to overcome this in the early game, or really for much of the entire game. This is not just an army, like with the Elves, this is not just an army for the early game, this is a really good army for the mid game, for the late game as well. It's pretty expensive, undeniably so, but it really, really does get the job done in a good and effective manner. And look, you can always recruit Dwarf Warriors if you so desire. They're going to be cheaper at 113 upkeep. Like, you could make a more balanced army if you so desire, if that's your choice to try and save up on money. Though I do feel like a Quarreller is just going to do a better job than a Dwarf Warrior. Unless you're being charged by a lot of cavalry, then yeah, there are some issues with that. Maybe having some Dwarf Warriors for that kind of specific purpose would be helpful. Now at number 3, and this is turn 14 in my Blessed Dread campaign, just doing some testing, checking out this particular army. So at number 3 we have Blackheart Corsairs, Dread Spears, Dark Shards, and Reaper Bolt Throwers. All of these units you can acquire from Black Ark. Now, not everyone starts with the Black Ark, so some are gonna take some time getting to this point. But the Blessed Dread does start with the Black Ark. Malice Darkblade starts with the Black Ark. I believe even Rakarth, if I'm not mistaken, starts with the Black Ark. Could be wrong on that. I haven't actually checked this campaign, but he may or may not. But there are at least 2 of the Dark Elven Lords to start with the Black Ark. And the thing about the Black Ark is that it's an incredibly good structure for recruitment, because you can get access to mages, you can get access to this line, the Corsair Cabins, the Warrior Hole, which will give you access to Black Ark Corsairs, and Black Ark Corsairs with handbows from level 1, then Dark Shards and Bleak Swords level 2, and then Sisters of Slaughter and Reaper Bolt Throwers at level 3. This is turn 14 in this campaign, and this army is quite something else. So first off, let's talk about the Black Ark Corsairs. The handbows are pretty much very similar to this, though, yeah, they may not have the pure melee potential, but they do have that range potential. But you won't need that range potential with this kind of army, I can assure you. So the Black Arks, the Black Ark Corsairs, they generate fear, and yeah, that's something they do by default. They have a passive ability. If you can get that Murderous Prowess, like if you can trigger that, right? That is the Dark Elven ability for every unit if you do take a lot of damage. They have Stalk, they have Hide and Forest, and they have Resilience. Now, look at these guys. They have a lot of armor, they have good leadership, they have good weapon strength, melee attack, melee defense. They're really hard to hit, really hard to do damage to. They can charge a ranged army, survive it, and tear it to shreds. And they can do a lot of armor-piercing damage. So the Quarrel army that I just showed, a full stack of these guys could likely beat that. Beat it easily, even. Though there are certainly some advantages with the range stack in a game. But that's just part of it. So that's the Black Ark Corsairs. The Dread Spears, you can recruit them from any tier 1 settlements. The purpose of the Dread Spears is to protect your flanks against any kind of cavalry units, or flankers in general. So that's their sole purpose. You may go with fewer, like going as low as 2, getting more Black Ark Corsairs. And then the Dark Shards are really good crossbows. They're not as good as Quarrelers. Their range is more limited. But damn, they do have quite a lot of potential in the fight. To be honest, there is some temptation to just like get rid of the Dark Shards and just go full on Black Ark Corsairs as a full stack, though I think this is one of the few balanced armies that actually works really well. The Black Ark Corsairs will tear apart any infantry unit in melee. They'll resist range units very well. The Dark Shards will tackle any kind of range units that you might encounter, and the Reaper Bolt Throwers are pretty decent early game artillery. So this is a balanced army between anti-infantry, ranged, and anti-large, and it will get the job done incredibly well in a large number of situations. And you can get it very quickly, and although it is an expensive army at over 3,400, it's more than capable of stopping anything that comes in its path. And to be fair, you could go without the Dark Shards with shields. Like, the fact that they do have shields does give them, a certain resistances against ranged. Though you do have Dark Shards without shields that you can get as well. Though interestingly, with the Black Ark, the structure that allows you to recruit Dark Shards also allows you to recruit Dark Shards with shields. So it's like, why would you not go with the Dark Shards with shields? Because they're just going to be able to block a significant amount of missile damage heading their way, and that is really their advantage over there. The Dark Shards, the Dread Spears will be able to hold quite well against large units, like the Dark Elven equivalent to High Elven Spearmen, and the Black Ark Corsairs are just really, really good units when it comes to melee. Actually, looking at this army makes me wonder if a Ranger Doomstack for the High Elves would be a really viable alternative. But then again, the High Elven Archers are just incredibly good and cheap and don't require a structure. These do require structures, that is the one downside. They do require structure, but since you can recruit Black Arcs, and, well, Black Arcs are pretty bloody nasty, you want to get artillery in a Black Arc and, you know, just help you out in a battle, that's also available. So yeah, basically, this is a Black Arc Doomstack, if you want to consider it like that, because you will recruit this far easier from a Black Arc, though you don't need a Black Arc to recruit all of these units, but it certainly makes your life a lot easier. And it is an incredibly good army on any lord, let alone on someone like Loki or Felhart, who I have over here, who gets significant benefits on top of that to those Black Arc Corsairs in Black Arc handbow units. Yeah, he's going to crank it up to 11 when it comes to it. But the goal with the lists here in this video is not just like, oh, the army of a particular lord is really good. No, it's like any army, any lord leading an army like this will have a really good time. And this kind of army is pretty strong in a fight. Bit more expensive, requires some tier some higher level structures, requires a Black Arc really to get it done, but incredible army all the same. Now at number 2 we have the greenskins with their goblin archers. No, we don't have the greenskins with the goblin archers. Rather, we have the greenskins with the nasty skulkers. Ooh, these guys are something else entirely, actually. So let me explain why this is. Now, these are kind of like Black Arc Corsairs, but they're nowhere near as good as you might think. However, they are cheaper. They are quite a bit cheaper, easier to recruit. They don't rely on a Black Arc. And they do have certain advantages as well. They get the 10% physical resistance, an opportunist murderer ability if they are engaged in a melee fight, right? So they get opportunistic. They get Vanguard deployment, they get resilience, and they get a smoke bomb, which is basically an anti-charge bonus. So effectively, the nasty skulkers, like, people use these guys to cheese in siege battles because the AI can't handle stock units, but really that's not what makes these guys so incredibly good. What makes these guys so incredibly good is the fact that there's genuinely no easy way to counter them. Unless we're talking about larger units potentially, and well, Grom the Paunch certainly has a way of dealing with that because he gives Goblin units anti-large benefits in his army. But these guys only require a tier 2 structure. Now I don't have it anymore because I give it to the Red Cloud over here in the campaign, but you only need a tier 2 barracks to recruit these, which is a significant advantage. And greenskins have a much better economy than the Dark Elves as well. But by default, right, by default, the nasty skulkers have stock, have opportunistic murder, have Vanguard deployment, and have a smoke bomb, which means that, well, stock basically protects them from range fire, because the AI won't see them until they're very close to them, so the range firepower that a lot of armies may have is not going to be as good against these guys as they would against other armies. Furthermore, cavalry is not good against them because they drop smoke bombs, which stops the charge of cavalry and tear cavalry to shreds. Actually, I defeated Carcassone's army here, and I was like amazed at how easily I tore it to shreds. And this is on legendary, very hard battle difficulty. It's actually quite something when you really see it in action. And that's just by default. Oh yes, by default. These guys have good leadership. They do very well in a fight. It does say poor leadership. I'm going to call bullshit on that, to be honest. Another benefit is that a lot of their damage is actually anti-armor piercing damage. It's not regular damage, it's armor piercing damage. So they're doing an incredible amount of damage against armor units. So they're great against most infantry. They're great against cavalry because cavalry can't really cycle charge them or charge them in general. They're great against range units because range units won't spot them until they're engaged in melee. They will do wonders in a siege battle. Even if you don't want to cheese a siege battle, which is fair enough, right? I don't like the cheating, basically, of, oh, I'm gonna break the AI. Like, people say, oh, when I made that mod video, it's like, people say, oh, you just want to make minor settlement battles easier. You think they're not easy? They are incredibly easy. And you can cheat with stock units. But no, it goes even further than that. even if you're not abusing that, you can just position these guys on an undefended portion of the wall or on the entrance, and then just while your main army or your front line is engaging the enemy, or you send some of these guys in the front line, you get to engage in melee, and then the flankers come in and tear the enemy to shreds, and the enemy won't see them. There lies the actual issue with dealing with the nasty Skulkers, and that's just by default. Then you get scrap upgrades, which gives them a bonus +10 versus infantry, and or perfect vigor, dependent on what you want to get over here. There's a reason people have talked about these guys being incredible. Personally, I think if you're playing greenskins, you can't do wrong stacking Goblin Archers. I think that's another option where you can make a more balanced army between nasty Skulkers, Goblin Archers, and you'll do incredibly well. Actually, I think the most ideal army, though it would be more expensive, would be Trolls, nasty Skulkers, Goblin Archers, and a Death Hag with Grom in particular, as well as maybe 2 Rock Lobbers, and that would be a really crazy early game army to get. But just a pure stack of nasty Skulkers will get the job done just as well, if not even more so. The AI just struggles dealing with these guys, and when you buff them up. Now, there is another thing to keep in mind with all of this. Something that doesn't apply to, say, the Quarrellers, or the Archers, or the Blackheart Corsairs, and that's research. See, greenskins have all their Goblin stuff all the way here, right? So not only are these guys really good by default, you can also get armor for Goblin units, missile strength, but that's not going to apply to the nasty Skulkers, but you can get armor for these guys from the start, recruit rank, leadership benefits, melee attack benefits, okay? You can get charge bonus, more melee attack, speed, more physical resistance, Vanguard deployment to all Goblins, right? And just keep getting some really, really good upgrades. And these are going to be available from the very start. Or Sharper Stab as melee attack for Goblin and Night Goblin units. Corrupt upgrades, right? So there's a lot of really good upgrades that take a pretty good unit by default and make it even better. And unlike other factions, you have this available from pretty much the very start of your campaign. This is why Goblins are so incredible in early game armies for greenskins. Actually, this is one of the main reasons greenskins do so well when you play them on the campaign, because they can get really cheap and effective units for all of their legendary lords. It doesn't matter who you're playing. They can get the Goblin Tide from very early on, and their Goblins are already in a pretty decent position. Sure, not the default Goblin units, but the Goblin Archers, yeah, they're gonna do pretty well. They can get that from any settlement building. You can get stacks and stacks and stacks of Goblin Archers, and then you can get the upgraded versions of the nasty Skulkers through and upgrade, and obviously get the upgrades through the research over here. That is available pretty early on, fairly cheap, fairly fast, and that is what makes this army really incredible. Because being able to have a campaign start where you get really powerful armies quickly is a significant advantage in any campaign, and the greenskins can do that like pretty much no one else except vampire counts. However, vampire counts are going to get a lot of skeletons and zombies. You're going to get units that would tear those zombies and skeletons to shreds, unless we're talking about Ghorst, though. That is a very specific situation. It's something you need to check out yourself to really understand, because you might be skeptical of a unit that doesn't have so much armor. But when you really see these guys, like, the real advantage for these guys is their melee attack. Their melee attack ensures that a lot of their hits will actually land. Right now, granted, that's with Grom, but even by default, they will get a lot of melee attack. And obviously, the Gobos really does help with that particular upgrade. Like, if your Lord, every single Lord, Greenskin Lord, should get the Gobos skill line, because it will give them incredible power. Yeah, they're just crazy. Just absolutely crazy. Like, I fought basically Carcassone's Doomstack in a field battle, and I expected it to be a bit harder. It's like, No, the battle was over in less than a minute on very hard battle difficulty with this army and tore it to shreds. I've played the campaign as Grom. I've won that battle before, but it's like, maybe I should just go and wipe out half of Lauren with this Doomstack, because they won't be able to stop it. And that gives you an idea of how crazy this is. Finally, at number 1, we have the Wood Elves. Any Wood Elven Legendary Lord, though the Sisters of Twilight are going to do this in the best possible fashion. Why is that? Well, because they get the Forge of Dave, they get some really good items, and they have one extra Doomstack option over the other Wood Elven Legendary Lords. See, at number 1, we don't just have one Doomstack, we have 3 Doomstacks available. The most basic one that you are going to have if you're playing the Wood Elves is the Glade Guards. Not necessarily the specialized Glade Guard units with Fire Shafts or Agpone Tips. No, they're regular ones. The very, very basic ones. Because any settlement building will allow you to recruit Glade Guard. Now, here's the thing about Glade Guard. Glade Guard, I'm going to have to go to another army on the other side of the map to really show you that, because they get some benefits. This is a level 3 Lord, right? Now, Glade Guard, what do they get? They get Woodsman, so they can move through trees. They get Fire while moving. So, not only can they shoot, and they shoot incredibly well, but they shoot while moving, right? Then they can hide in the forest, and they have Resilience. That already is very, very strong enough. They don't have the same kind of ranged as the High Elven Archers, but yeah, they're gonna do generally better than those high elven archers. And these guys just have poison. Like, all of them have pretty good damage against units. That's the first Doomstack. Pretty good ranged Doomstack. No army can hold up against them in a field battle. It's a bit weak against siege because, yeah, you don't have any way of breaking down walls with it. And ammunition is an issue. Though you could just, get some units with stock. There are some choices over here. See, the Wood Elves get all of their range units pretty early on. Later they get their higher end units are actually more melee oriented. Okay, but that's the first thing. The Glade Guard option. It's available to pretty much all of the Wood Elven Legendary Lords. And it's an incredibly good army that's capable of destroying everything in its path with relative ease. Now, the Sisters of Twilight get a second option, Hawk Riders. See, they personally get an upkeep benefit to missile units, but they also get the melee attack benefit to flying units. And their skill tree, well, their skill tree is going to benefit flying units even more. And they get the faction-wide ability that gives the Hawk Riders a cruise missile. That's why I mean Hawk Riders are only really available for the Sisters of Twilight. They're relatively cheap to maintain. I mean, granted, with some of the items that I have, that all units would be cheap to maintain, but they're not really that expensive, and they're quite very strong. And on top of that, they're gonna be pretty decent melee, because Hawk Riders, yeah, do they have limited ammunition? So you use the Sister of Twilight to fire cruise missiles. Using cruise missiles in a fight, you expend their ammunition, then you land in melee and tear the enemy to shreds. That's the second Doomstack. Both of these are really good. Both of them are very much available from very early on if you're playing the Sisters of Twilight. The Glade Guard is available to every army. The Hawk Riders are really available for the Sisters of Twilight because they get the structure in their starting settlement pretty quickly at tier 2 that allows them to recruit Hawk Riders. Also gives them missile strength plus 5%. But neither of those armies is really what I wanted to talk about here. No, the true Wood Elven Doomstack is right over here, ladies and gentlemen. The Treekin Doomstack. You know Durfu and Draika, who are absolute terrors if you meet them on the campaign map. Durfu conquers the dwarves and moves into the Empire in a lot of campaigns. Durfu, who if you encounter on the campaign map, you better pray you can cheese that battle in some way because he's going to tear you to shreds. Same with Draika. Actually, Draika is in some way worse because she has magical abilities. Though I'd say Durfu is better because Draika just won't have the ranged power. So with Durfu, you can get some Glade Guard, but he's really all about the Treekin units. His Lord effects is like minus 30% upkeep for Forest Spirit units. His special skill trees, well, physical resistance, melee defense when defending, vigor loss reduction, leadership when attacking, some other benefits as well. Fire resistance and armor. That 15 armor for Dryad, Treekin, and Treeman units is pretty damn scary. But any army that has Tree Spirits is going to do very well. At tier 1, you'll get Dryads. They're pretty decent, though they're weak against armor. Here's the thing, though. They cause fear, they have physical resistance, they're pretty scary, and they have Vanguard deployment. Okay, that's the first one. Just the ability they cause fear is an advantage in their own right. And they're pretty good, well armored. This is a tier 1 unit. Just remember that. This is tier 1. They don't have this best melee attack, melee defense, all that. But yeah, they're already pretty scary. Then at tier 3, you start talking about Treekin. And yeah, Treekin start becoming ridiculously powerful. If I look at them, I'm not sure if they do have the ward save. I believe they may have it. But it doesn't matter. They get a lot of missile resistance. They're extremely heavily armored, and they have missile resistance on top of that. They have physical resistance on top of that. They start getting really, really crazy from very early on. They're siege attackers. They cause fear. And Draika and Durfu will both start with the Treemen, who causes terror on top of that. Yeah, these guys are a genuine horror show when you meet them on the field of battle. But why is that? Well, because even armored infantry units would struggle to take them down. Because they're extremely resistant. They have very high armor. They have high missile resistance. In this case, they even have ward save, a significant amount of ward save. But they're highly resistant units. You can even upgrade them further if you like, if you're playing Durfu or Draika, I think. But yeah, they're just really, really scary. They do a lot of damage. They have high leadership, high armor, and you're just not going to be able to break these guys. They'll tear your army to shreds. Like, there's no ranged unit in the early game that can handle these. Hell, even in the late game, there are a few ranged units that can handle these very easily. The Treekin. And this is a tier 3 unit. It's a unit that you'll be able to recruit fairly easily, given the growth, the situation that Elven settlements have. Right? With Elven settlements have. So you're going to be able to recruit these very early on. They're not too expensive. And units that cost about, like, keep on, these guys are about less than 1,000 gold. Just to give you an idea. That's like Quarreller level, though they tear Quarrellers to shreds. Actually, they tear any unit that I've talked about in this video so far to shreds. I would take these guys against Chosen, and I'm not sure the Chosen would win, though the ones with great weapons probably would. But yeah, they're really scary. That high armor means that it's very difficult to do any real damage with them. The fact they cause fear means your army is gonna break long before they do. Long before they do. So what happens is, if you get a combined army of Glade Guard, Treekin, Treemen, Dryads, there's no counter to that. Like, genuinely, there's very few armies in the entire game, mid-game, late game, doesn't matter, that can counter that. Now, this is turn 47, because this was in a Sister of Twilight campaign. It took me a while to get Durfu, to confederate to Durfu. Though you can start playing as Durfu. Actually, you can get this army even if you're not playing as Durfu. You're not, or Draika, you're not limited to that. Though it makes more sense, of course, if you're playing the Sisters of Twilight or Orion to focus on either Hawk Riders or Glade Guard. If you're playing as Durfu, though, or Draika, like, yeah, get this army. It is unstoppable. Like, genuinely, it is unstoppable. Because a lot of factions don't have good armor piercing early on. Even those that do, there's always some catch, right? Either cost all that, or something along those lines. Like, this army costs about the same as the other armies I've shown, and it would tear every single one of those armies to shreds, even when not led by Durfu. When you put Durfu or Draika in charge of an army like this, it's not just powerful. It's like it's a genuine terror on the campaign map. Meeting this army, like, vast majority of times, 95% of times when I'm playing a campaign on Legendary, I generally don't concern myself about battle outcome, regardless of what I'm playing on, who I'm playing on, how I'm playing. But when I meet this army, it's like, that's when you start sweating. Because this kind of army, because Durfu and Draco both will have these armies, and they are generally horrific to deal with. Actually, my best advice if you're dealing with this army is don't even try and fight it on an open field. Like, if you're fighting in a settlement, that's one thing, because you can snipe their leader, you can break their leadership, all that. But if you're fighting in an open field, try and have a situation where you can auto-resolve, like have more armies than the enemy and auto-resolve it, because that's going to be your best bet. Otherwise, if you're having to fight this manually, good luck. That's all I can tell you. Just genuinely good luck, because you're not going to be able to kill them. They're heavily resistant to missile damage. Even armor-piercing range damage is going to struggle against these guys. And when they get in melee, and they will, it's pretty much game over. And very, very few things you can do. Which makes these guys an absolute terror on the campaign map, and an absolute juggernaut. You take this army against any enemy, doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter what level of the game it is. Sure, later on in the game you would have Treemen and Treekin, and you'd replace the Dryads with Treemen. But even early game when you are using Dryads, it's a really good army. This army, by the way, is actually available to someone else. It's not just the Wood Elves. Like, if you don't have the Wood Elves, you can play Alariel, who has a special structure over here in the game Vale for a reason she ended up losing it. In this particular campaign, oddly enough. I guess that was a specific event that popped for the Wood Elves. But Alariel in the Gaian Vale has a specific unique structure that allows her to recruit Dryads, Treekin, and Treemen. That might actually be the most horrific thing you could encounter on the campaign map, because you combine the range firepower of the elves with their heroes, with their artillery, with Treekin and Treemen. Yeah, that is crazy. But it's only something available to her, and it would be more difficult to get. The Wood Elves can get this army on all their legendary lords. It isn't too expensive. It isn't too hard to get. It doesn't require a lot of effort. And you can get more than one army. 2 free armies of Treekin brushing around the campaign map. Yeah, there's power. And then there's the tree spirits of Athel Lauren. And that's all there is to say. Costin here, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, enable notifications, and I'll see you next time.